They vanished, and no one questioned it. Figure moves alone in the shadows. Her breath catches. Every step echoes in empty halls. Something unseen watches, waiting. But why her? Asterisk, an order arrived simple, yet impossible. It wasn't her job. No one expected her to comply. Still, she had no choice. The others stared. Attention hung in the air, thick as fog. Obedience was optional, until the first consequence whispered through the walls. No one spoke of it. No one questioned it. Yet the weight of expectation pressed down like iron. Asterisk silence presses down like a living weight. Every step she takes is measured, cautious, hesitant. She glances at the others, eyes down, faces blank, but she knows they are watching. A question hovers. Do I speak, or do I obey? Her mind replays the order over and over, like a scratched record. Each time, it grows heavier, darker, impossible to ignore. The corridors seem longer. Shadows stretch unnaturally. Every whisper, every shuffle of feet, feels like judgment. Sleep offers no relief. In her dreams, she walks the same hallways. Doors slam shut without reason. Footsteps chase her, but no one is there. Voices murmur in the dark, repeating fragments she doesn't fully understand. The boundary between nightmare and reality begins to blur. She isolates herself further, retreating into small routines. Meals are eaten silently. Words are avoided. Even the simplest gestures, sitting, standing, walking, carry the weight of consequence. And yet, she fights against it. A tiny spark of defiance flickers. She considers speaking, reaching out, breaking the silence. But fear claws back. The risk feels unimaginable. The hallways themselves seem to hold her captive, pressing her into obedience. Time stretches. Minutes feel like hours. A single glance from the doctor. A whisper from a guard. A shadow moving at the edge of her vision. All are magnified, distorted, haunting. Every heartbeat is a question. Every breath feels wrong. She is trapped. Not physically, but mentally. Each moment tests her resolve, her conscience, her sanity, and as the hours drag on, the invisible pressure grows. A storm of doubt, guilt, fear, and secrecy rages inside her. She wonders, if I stay silent, am I complicit? If I speak, will I survive? The camera lingers on her face, eyes wide, pupils darting, hands trembling slightly. A tear forms. She swallows it. The room is quiet. Too quiet. And she knows deep down that no one will truly understand what she carries. Asterisk's small routines begin to shift. Breakfast trays arrive slightly late. Guards glance at her with strange hesitation. A whispered comment drifts past, but no one confirms it. She notices that fellow prisoners move differently, slightly off, slower, tense. Their faces sharper, shadows under their eyes longer. The doctor walks past her, noting a slight tremor in her hands. He says nothing. No one says anything. Yet the weight of his silent acknowledgement is heavier than words. Even the simplest axe washing, sweeping, lining up for roll call carry unease. Something unseen presses against the normal rhythm of the day. Her heartbeat echoes louder with each step. Small noises, an overturned bucket, a distant cough become disproportionately frightening. She begins to notice patterns that do not belong. The same guard always passing by at the same moment. The same shadow lingering near a corner. She wonders if it's real, or her mind playing tricks. Consequences begin to appear before the cause is visible. A mess is found in the kitchen, but no one admits to it. A missing item appears later in a completely unrelated room. Time itself seems elastic. Minutes stretch unnaturally. Hours vanish. She sees a fellow prisoner flinch at an invisible threat. She hears muffled sounds in rooms that are empty. The camp's walls seem to breathe. Corridors twist in memory. She retraces her steps repeatedly, never reaching the same result twice. The others begin to whisper, but only in fragments. No complete sentence. No explanation. She tries to piece it together, but the more she observes, the less sense it makes. A tray drops on the floor. She doesn't see who did it. A shadow falls across her bed, yet no one is there. A note appears in her belongings, ambiguous, threatening. She senses that time itself is conspiring to confuse her. Repeated, unanswered details dominate her world. A door creaks at the same time every night. A sound of footstep, a cough, a whisper repeats endlessly. A glance from the doctor, a look from a guard, a stare from another prisoner, all seem to carry meaning she cannot interpret. Her own mind begins to trap her. Thoughts spiral. Was that sound real? Did she imagine it? Did anyone notice? The order she received, the one she obeyed, becomes an obsession. Every small deviation, something she did wrong, or maybe right, becomes magnified in her memory. She cannot sleep. She cannot rest. She cannot trust her own senses. The boundaries between reality, expectation, and imagination blur. Everything becomes a question. Nothing is answered. Every new detail raises more questions. Who left that note? Why does the shadow move differently? What is the doctor hiding? Are others aware? Or is she alone in noticing? The tension grows subtly, invisibly, but relentlessly. No dramatic explosions, no sudden horror, just a constant accumulation of unease. Even a simple glance toward a corner can make her flinch. A breath in the hallway makes her heart race. Time feels wrong. Space feels wrong. And she feels trapped in a pattern she cannot escape. Asterisk time stretches differently here. Days pass, but nothing official happens. Reports are missing. Logs disappear. Orders vanish as if they never existed. She walks past the same rooms, but each door seems slightly different, wider, narrower, darker. The echoes of footsteps do not match anyone present. Whispers float in corridors, fragmented, incomplete, as though memory itself has been erased. Survivors avoid her gaze. They speak in fragments. It happened, but not here, not now. She searches their eyes for answers. There are none. Only flickers of fear, recognition, and guilt. Even the guards seem altered. Their usual authority is muted. Their expressions blank, unreadable. No one acknowledges what occurred. No one confirms it. Yet the impact lingers, subtle and unavoidable, like smoke in the lungs. Her mind begins to fracture. She cannot remember exactly what happened, only pieces. A shadow where none should exist. A whisper she cannot place. A tray overturned, yet no one claims it. A bed left empty. Each fragment is amplified. Time collapses. Moments repeat, slightly altered. She feels herself losing the line between memory and imagination. She wonders, did it happen, or did I imagine it? Even small objects are tainted by suspicion. A cup on a shelf seems wrong. A shadow on the wall seems accusatory. She touches a chair. It feels cold in a way it never should. Everything carries weight. Everything carries guilt. The hospital, the camp, the rooms, they are altered permanently. The air smells different. Corridors curve subtly. Light falls strangely. It's as though the buildings themselves remember. Others avoid discussion. Survivors mutter in the corner, never connecting words into sentences. New prisoners arrive, unaware of what occurred. They never see, never hear, but the tension infects them subtly, as if the place itself communicates the weight of unspoken horrors. She tries to speak, but words die in her throat. Even the doctors who were present remain silent. Notes are blank. Files are missing. It is as if the event never existed, yet it shapes every moment afterward. Consequences arrive not as punishment, not as retribution, but as erasure. A record vanishes. A memory fades. A life is subtly changed. She feels it in small ways. A guard looks at her differently, but says nothing. A fellow prisoner recoils at a glance, but refuses to meet her eyes. The order she obeyed echoes in her mind relentlessly, even when all else is silent. There is no justice. There is no closure. Only quiet. Only memory fragments. Only the oppressive, invisible pressure of what cannot be spoken. Every morning feels identical, but different. A cup on a table. a shadow in a corner, a whisper in the hall. She walks silent, observes silent, breathes silent. Her mind becomes a repository of events that officially never existed, weighed down by guilt, fear, and unanswerable questions. She wonders, who decides what is remembered and what is erased? Her eyes wander over empty rooms. Light falls differently today. The world feels altered, subtly. Unnervingly, even years later, she knows she cannot speak. The story is hers alone, trapped inside. She has survived, but at the cost of her voice, her certainty, her reality. Asterisk, the hospital was quiet. The quiet itself felt alive. The corridors stretched endlessly, empty beds casting long shadows in the pale light from high windows. She walked slowly, her shoes echoing on the stone floor. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the building itself weighed her down. Silence had become a voice louder than any word, heavier than any command. She paused by a window and watched the light shift across the walls. Shadows moved, but not naturally elongating, bending, almost as if they were carrying memories she could not touch. A soft hum, like the distant echo of a machine, lingered in the air. It was the sound of absence, of things that had happened but would never be recorded. Fear and obedience, choice and morality, all pressed on her at once. She had acted out of duty, yet each act carried invisible consequences. The hospital remembered even if no one else did. Her colleagues avoided her gaze, their faces pale, distant. They carried fragments of memory, but no one would speak. She realized that silence was not just safety, it had become survival. She wandered deeper into the ward. Empty stretchers, neatly arranged equipment, quiet hallways were all she saw, but each detail whispered questions. What weight does unspoken consequence carry? Who suffers most when the story is erased? How much of human nature is revealed when silence becomes the only shield? Her journal lay on a desk, filled with fragmented notes, each one heavier than the last. She had tried to capture the truth, but words felt inadequate. Every line, every scribbled observation reminded her of what could never be said. Even the act of remembering was a burden. The corridors seemed to stretch further than before. She turned, expecting someone to appear, someone to break the silence. But the hospital remained still. The echoes were hers alone. The shadows seemed to move slightly, subtly, impossibly, as though the very air carried memory that no one else could see. Asterisk, the corridor seemed to stretch longer than it had moments ago. Light poured through tall, narrow windows, cutting the stone floor into jagged black and white patterns. Each beam was sharp, yet soft, illuminating floating dust motes that drifted like tiny spirits. She walked slowly, her footsteps echoing faintly. Each tap against the cold tile sounding unnaturally loud in the cavernous emptiness. The silence around her was not mere absence, it was weight. Pressing against her ears, her chest, her mind. Forming a presence that seemed almost conscious, she ran her hand along the wall. Fingertips brushing the cold, rough stone. It hummed faintly beneath her touch, almost imperceptibly, as if the building itself remembered every moment that had passed. Every silent act, every obedience given under duress. Each crack and crevice seemed to carry whispers, snatches of conversations she'd never heard. Instructions that were never spoken aloud, fragments of memories that belonged to someone else, yet pressed themselves onto her consciousness as if demanding recognition. The shadows shifted in impossible ways. Where the light ended, darkness twisted and stretched unnaturally, forming shapes she thought she saw from the corner of her eye movement that was never repeated when she looked directly. For a moment, she saw herself in the shifting shadows, not as a living human being, but as part of the building itself. A witness, a keeper of erased stories, a vessel of events that would never be officially acknowledged. She felt the weight of it in her bones. The hospital was no longer a place of treatment and care. It was a repository of invisible consequences, where every choice left a mark, and every silence carried moral weight. She paused at a bend in the corridor and listened. There was no sound, and yet everything felt alive. The faintest hum of the building, the soft creak of settling stone. The distant echo of some imagined footstep Paul combined to form a tension that was almost unbearable. She realized that no one would ever acknowledge the events she had witnessed or the decisions she had made. Files were missing. Orders had vanished. Survivors avoided her gaze. The story had been erased, and yet it clung to her. Invisible, but unrelenting. Every step forward carried her deeper into the reflection of human nature under pressure. She remembered the nurses, the prisoners, the absent doctors, and wondered who truly suffered. Was it the ones who had obeyed, who had acted silently to survive? Was it those who had watched, silently complicit? Or was it herself, bound forever to the memory of choices she could not share, 2 acts erased from history, and 2 consequences that were unseen but unrelenting? Her shadow stretched long across the polished floor. For a moment it seemed to move independently, bending slightly as though it carried its own weight. The light shifted, falling differently across each surface, and she realized she was no longer simply walking the corridor, she was walking through the layers of memory embedded into it. The walls remembered what the papers did not. The floors remembered what the voices could not speak. And she alone carried the awareness of it all. She stopped by an empty bed and stared at it. Nothing was out of place, yet everything was different. The air seemed heavier, the room colder, though she could feel no draft. Light fell at impossible angles, illuminating the edges of the bed and stretching her shadow across the floor. She ran her fingers over the thin sheet. It felt smooth, almost alive, vibrating faintly under her touch. She realized that even objects, even surfaces, had become carriers of memory. They absorbed the unspoken, the erased, the silent weight of human actions. The corridors now felt like a labyrinth, though she had walked them countless times. Turns repeated themselves subtly. Hallways elongated, shadows shifted just enough to distort space and time. Each step felt heavier than the last, and she knew that the building itself was shaping her perception, bending her mind toward reflection and remembrance. She paused again, taking a slow, deliberate breath. The silence was absolute, yet it carried weight and intention. No sound of life disturbed it, yet she felt observed not by people, but by memory itself. It was as though every act of obedience, every hidden choice, every silent moment in the hospital was woven into the fabric of the walls, the floor, the very air. And she alone was conscious of it all. The questions formed slowly, as if whispered by the building itself. Who truly suffers when the story is never told? How much of human nature is revealed when silence becomes survival? Can consequences exist even when no one witnesses them? She did not answer. No one would. And yet the weight of these questions pressed upon her relentlessly, as if the air itself demanded acknowledgement. She moved forward. Each step measured the sound of her shoes, soft yet echoing through the corridor. Light spilled from the tall windows, slicing the floor into jagged black and white patterns. The shadows shifted subtly with every step, as if the building itself were alive, breathing around her. Each corner she turned carried a new sense of absence. Beds empty. Stretchers neatly aligned, papers stacked as if untouched for decades. Yet carrying the weight of stories never told, she paused again, pressing her hand to the cold stone wall. It hummed faintly beneath her fingers, resonating with all the choices made in silence. She thought of the prisoners, of the nurses, of the invisible acts of obedience and moral compromise. Who had suffered most? The silent witnesses, the absent authorities, or herself, trapped in the awareness of events erased from every record? The corridor seemed impossibly long. The light shifted once more, casting her shadow in impossible angles, stretching it until it felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. She realized that she had become part of the hospital's memory, a living recorder of erased actions, invisible consequences, and unspoken fears. Every wall, every floorboard, every drifting motes of dust seemed to hold fragments of moments she could never share. Silence was no longer the absence of sound. It had become presence, a force, a reflection of human nature under pressure, obedience and fear, morality and survival, all intertwined in a delicate, invisible web. She understood that the story would never be told. It could not be, yet it would never truly disappear. It lived in the shadows, in the light, in the long corridors, in the quiet pressure of memory itself. She took a deep breath and stepped forward once more. The hospital held its silence, vast and absolute, yet alive. The questions lingered, unresolved. Who truly suffers when the story is never told? How much of human nature is revealed when silence becomes survival? Can consequences exist even when no one witnesses them? Her silhouette stretched long across the polished floor. The hospital exhaled softly around her. No one would answer. No one would remember. The weight of all that had happened, the obedience, the choices, the unseen consequences, remained, quietly pressing upon her alone. And in that moment, she understood the haunting truth. Some stories are never told, not because they are forgotten, but because silence itself is survival. And survival often comes at the cost of truth. The corridor remained, empty yet alive, shadow and light intertwined. Carrying memory that no one else could see, the haunting was complete.